All right, I think we'll do it this way. This way I can see the room, kind of monitor the questions, then we'll have these three guys answer them. So I think I'll kick things off with the question that I'd like all three of you guys to answer. I know that, Dennis, I know that you've used some biologicals in that soybean program, and you've stopped using phosphorus 7 years ago, but yeah, your levels are maintaining. Hank, I know you're talking about using biologicals and cutting out some of your starter fertility. And Aaron, I don't know if you guys have looked at using, compost extracts or any biological inputs like that. So, Dennis, why don't you start? But just everybody just kind of give a little bit of where you're at in either using them or thinking about using them.
Well, I used biologicals for, I think, 5 years, and it's a little bit like putting on starter fertilizer. I mean, you worked with farmers, for half a century, and it's like they never could figure out if the starter was working or not, but thought maybe got it up there. But still, biologicals are a little bit in that same category for me, quite honestly. I put it in fertile, and it's interesting concoction of stuff that I kind of blend together, but kind of combination of microbes and then food, and it makes sense to me that it's a good thing to do, and kind of that category of soybean inoculant. Like a lot of the field probably doesn't make any difference, but there are some of the soils that aren't as good probably does make a little bit of difference, and it's not that expensive, so I've been applying it, and I've done a little bit of foliar, over the top, and the thing that's kind of unknown is I used it on my soybeans this year, and there were just nobody had soybeans alive after the end of August, and mine were just green, and I kept being asked, how many fungicide applications did you do? Because they knew that may be major. I've never used a fungicide. And so that biological could have had an impact last year that I don't know, but I don't know why or how. So, but really does.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We haven't tried any biologicals yet outside of, we put some on with our cereal rye last fall on about 400 acres. It looks good. Rye's coming out of dormancy. It's kind of hard to tell. We're not going to harvest the rye, but we thought we'd try some, it's a nitrogen fixing product, and we thought maybe we could go with nitrogen or go in with corn on those fields. So we'll see what happens. I'm not going to use any phosphoric acid fertilizers this spring. We're going to go ahead and put biological on and see how it works. So we'll see. But then part of the reason I made that decision is, looking at our soil tests, we're seeing the phosphorus stay up there. And the other thing is I've noticed, when my dad first started using 1034-0 back in the late 70s, early 80s, usually, if you'd have a row plugged or something, you could identify it right away. And once in a while I plug a row and I really don't notice much of a difference. So that was a big part of the reason why I have decided to change. So.
So we haven't used any biologicals. It is on my list of things to dive into. I have enough projects, research projects that we do, so that's one on my list I haven't got there. There are two things that we do. One I'm going to let a cat out of the bag for the one. Manure, obviously we have enough cows. We do shred whatever manure we have. The way our operation works, we don't have as much as probably most people that have a third or a fourth as many animals as we do. We do a lot of spread out calving and stuff like that. We're also situated very well where we have two large plots that basically are just calving or feeding grounds for the spring. So that spreads the manure out a lot, and that basically just recuperates those. The second point I wanted to make, we use biosolids, so that's kind of a hidden gem that most people don't know about. Basically, it's treated human waste is what it is. It's liquid gold is what it is. It's better than chicken litter. It's better than manure. It's really hard to get a hold of. But the one point I wanted to make about that, for anyone that this might be a little political, but Grand Island has been spending millions of dollars to dump it into their waste landfill instead of putting it on farmers' fields. That's a little known trick that not very many people know about because biosolids is such a limited use subject or substance. But we've been trying to get Grand Island to allow farmers to use it, but for political reasons, I think the mayor is funded to dump it in the landfill rather than let farmers use it. So that's my one little cat I won't let out of the bag.
We'll have to follow up on that. All right, folks, here's your chance to ask your questions to these guys, a whole breadth of knowledge here, so we'll start right here. Yes.
Dennis, what biological did you use?
Question is, what biological did he use?
It's an interesting concoction of stuff put together, so can't really respond on that. But worked with the folks at Elevate Ag, I think very knowledgeable of the products they put together, and I trust that products have what they say they have in them, and have learned a lot from them about getting that balance of microbes, and you have to feed the microbes, and would be Elevate Ag, and I think they're here today.
And that would be a compost extract type product, and we've got some information on that. Steve Shivers over here was Midwest Soil Restore, has some similar type products, so you can make sure you can talk to Steve as well. So applying a liquid compost extract for a lot of people is much easier than a dry compost. Kind of depends on how your equipment's set up, so that might be a good place to start. Who's next? What other questions do we have?
Steve.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Scott, go ahead.
So it's so your phosphorus level or maintain what your acid level is doing because I'm trying to figure out how before like Zenisimo back out sir. It's in slot.
So let me just repeat the question for everybody over here. So the question is, your phosphorus levels are maintaining for Dennis in particular, but we'll see what Hanks do. The question is, are the potassium levels staying where they need to be as well?
My potassium levels are very excessive.
Well,
Yeah, we're in the land of high potassium.
Actually, they were just
I used to be too.
very
Because you grow too good crops. How about you guys? Are your potassium levels, where are they at?
Yeah, mine don't seem to be sliding. They're pretty high. Consequently, magnesium is pretty high too. But it seems as though the organic matter, as it increases, it seems to be maintaining or slightly increasing my P and K. And unfortunately, I think magnesium could be tightening up some of the nitrogen also. I don't have a clear answer. I'm kind of learning on some of this myself, but I will tell you the organic matter is improving. The carbon parts per millions are growing. I'm up over 300 parts per million on a lot of the places on my carbon. So we're in a good place. It's just we'll see what it does. I've been to several of these meetings, and there was a seed corn dealer that showed up at one of them, and he said one of the biggest things that he's seen with this regenerative ag, with cover cropping in general, that is disappointing is he'll see people do it for 2 or 3 years because they're not seeing the yield response that they want to see on corn, for example. It takes a little longer on corn. You'll see a quicker response on the soybeans. And he said, I've seen so many people quit right before that yield curve was just about to go straight up for them. So you got to kind of hang with it a little bit, and it will test your faith. When your friends and neighbors are all out there and their fields look like radish gardens, it's kind of hard that first 30 days to go out there and look at your field. It does. It tests your patience a little bit, but it will come around and it will prove resourcefulness.
Easy.
Yeah, so potassium, we had about 4 or 5 years ago, we had a local farmer get a heart attack, and we ended up farming a few of his farms, very different from what we did. I think that guy tilled more than he did anything else in his life. Love him to death, great guy. But we found that we did grid sampled everything, got everything up to snuff, and then we came through and added one more application, and that seems to be enough. We're not sliding, but I can't say working either. But once we had it up to snuff and had everything going where it needed to be, things kind of took off.
But part of what I heard there is that tillage can cause heart attacks, so you gotta stop doing that. So. That's one of those little nuggets that you can take home.
Single point.
Great question. Other questions? Yes.
This one's for Aaron. He mentioned about chopping rye. I've put up rye with and wrapping the bales right after you swamped them. Could that be too much traffic on that field if you put up like
Yeah, so the question is on putting up baleage or wrap bales versus a chopped application.
Obviously, less traffic is better. I think a big reason for the success we've had is everything is happening in one day. Baleage, if you had the right crew, I'm sure it could work. There's also you got to add in some factors. There's going to be some trial and error with that. But if you got a little 3-acre piece you want to try it on, go right ahead. I can't say I've done any baleage or baling anything. Most of the damage we see comes from the trucks going up the top. The rake doesn't seem to do much. The swather doesn't seem to do much unless it gets too late in the season. Then we see damage from the swather. But chopper head definitely isn't doing nothing to them. So most of the damage we see is from the trucks.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
The question, do any of you raise your own rye for seed?
Hey, the question was, does any of you raise your own rye for seed?
I would like to start.
So we go seed.
And part of the reason I say that is in Bladen, these boys do an excellent job. They've got a lot of great research, but it's an hour and 20 minutes away.
Yeah, limit.
Well, I think I planted 5 or 6 semi-loads rye last year. We got several of our neighbors involved in this, and since I'm the only guy in the area with a do-and-till drill, every time I talk a neighbor into regenerative ag, we're getting kind of maxed out. Yeah, of course, a lot of these guys try to source their own stuff, and they don't always do the best math. And it's kind of hard. I'm gonna have to, if I go to Flayton, I'm gonna have to set up a band, and we're gonna have to go get it in advance. But yeah, there's some logistical issues there. I think a lot of the things that that we're seeing is it's easier to get it planted than it is to source the seed. And I think, I hope Keith understands, if everybody in this room goes home and starts planting rye next year, he's going to have to buy some.
I'll make a comment on that. Aaron, are you doing any of that?
Yeah. We've ever since the second year. So for about 13 years, we've been harvesting our own rye. It's super easy to do, to be honest. We took one farm that it's one of those farms too far away, too rocky, too rough, too much contour in it, and when I finally got deep enough into the farm to where I was in the management side, kind of doing profit stuff, we were actually losing money. We'd lost money 11 out of the 13 years. I could go back and do math on it. So we turned that to we're doing rye and some few other hay stuff with it. And surprisingly enough, we made more money on the rye on that farm that year than we did on corn soybeans. So when the price gets pretty astronomical, you can make some pretty good money doing it.
So my comments on that would be, if you're going to grow something for seed, rye is definitely going to be one of the easiest, partially because there's a lot of laws and regulations with growing seed if you're trying to grow something that's protected. So you don't want to, most of the triticale varieties are protected, a lot of the new wheat varieties, some of the new oat varieties, those all have protections on them, and if you're not growing those as a licensed certified seed grower, you can get in trouble. With cereal rye, that's not the case. Most of these cereal varieties, a couple of these guys referenced Elbon. I mean, Elbon was developed back in the 50s. But the great thing is typically on an old variety like that, nobody is maintaining pure seed stock. Well, Oklahoma State still grows foundation Elbon rye every year because it's that popular. Yeah. So Elbon is an old variety that you can still get fresh seed supply. And that's important that you know what you're starting with. My other thing that I would tell you is that if you're going to do that, treat it like a seed crop and not a grain crop, because there is a difference. Make sure you're doing a good job with weed control, because you don't want to be replanting your own weed seeds out there. You're growing seed and not grain, so treat it like that. Make sure you got a place to store it. Make sure you clean it. I know you guys think that your combines do a really good job and it can go right through, but it only takes plugging your drill once or twice, and you're going to wish that you would have cleaned it out or having the weed seed. So, treat it like seed crop. Get clean, get it tested, then it's certainly not a problem, and it's something that is relatively easy to do for those who are wanting to go down that path.
One thing I wouldn't mind mentioning is when it comes to weeds, we haven't seen the weeds in the cereal rye. Once we planted it has almost eliminated everything except maybe palmer amaranth. We don't see it, the palmer, come up until after we've terminated to rye. That's the one thing that nobody's mentioned here, is we have almost no weeds in the spring where we've got that planted. On the farm that I live on, the hens bed is in my yard. It's flower beds and road ditches. I mean, it grows like wild. It's just crazy. And I've had it all over my fields. Neighbors have it in their fields. It's just a mess. And that first year we planted rye, I noticed that it's a 10-inch drill. The first row would have, it was blooming in May, and it was probably this high and all flowered out purple. And then the next row, the first row in, it was a little bit shorter with no flowers on it. The next row in, it was half the size again. And then by the third row, it's just non-existent, and there wasn't any out in the field. So we've pretty much eliminated the need for residual herbicide. I've been putting some down just as a safety precaution, but I almost think you could go post-emerge and get away with not using it at all.
And if you have mare's tail, cereal rye will almost eliminate mare's tail. And that used to be one of the hardest weeds that we had to control. Great question. Yep.
I have a question, and it might be for you, but those of us that were really dry, which I assume were the last people, and didn't plant stuff last fall, is there, instead of rye, something we could plant for a cover crop in the spring, because the soil doesn't become biologically active till about 40 degrees?
Yeah. So the question is, we didn't get anything planted last fall because we ran out of time or it was dry. Is there something you can do now to kind of get that soil up and going? And the answer is yeah. Oats, barley, peas, any of those spring type crops like that. And you can actually get a lot more diversity planting now than you could back in October, because we know that it's probably only rye and maybe some veg that would survive the winter. Well, now you can plant oats, barley, peas, rapeseed, flax, safflower. There's a number of things. And what you have to keep in mind is, if you want to go out there and be planting your corn April 20th, that's probably not the field to do it on. But if you've got some later planted fields that you're going to do this on, yeah, you can, we'd like to see, 6 weeks of growth would be really nice on it. And so just kind of look at what the timing that you have on that. Probably not something that you do on all your fields, but certainly on some of them you can do. And again, don't judge the success of a cover crop by what's happening above the ground. You've got to do some digging and see what's going on below the ground. Those pictures I was showing of Jimmy's rye, that stuff was only 10 inches tall. And you could get 10-inch tall oats and barley and things like that planted now. If you only had like a 70-degree day or something in February to get that planted, it would really work well.
I'd really like to add to that. So I had so you asked if it was too late to plant rye. You can actually plant rye now. So UNL asked that exact question: what is too late to plant rye? And they said February is not too late to plant rye. Now the odds are a lot worse in February than it is October. But rye is such a hardy species. Don't quote me on these numbers, but I believe it starts growing when it's 34 degrees. All it needs
It'll germinate.
germinate at 34 degrees. I forget what that specific term is, but it's got to germinate and then it's got to freeze. Well, Nebraska's at that right level where it can freeze one day and it can be
It has to fertilize.
yes, fertilized. That's correct terminology. So rye is one of those species. If it gets to December or January, you're like, it's too late. With rye, it's not too late. You can plant that stuff pretty much year round.
In worst case scenario, you plant it and it doesn't get cold enough to fertilize it. Well, it'll still get 3-4 inches tall. It'll thicken out. It just won't elongate and get really big or really tall, which may be okay. It's still going to give you roots in the ground. It's still going to give you some erosion protection and things like that too. So, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily give up on rye now either, especially if you have some on hand.
And a big differentiation between rye and wheat. So wheat, I think it's at 20. If the seed gets down to 20 degrees, it'll kill it. Rye, I think it needs to get down to negative 20. So where you see the thinning out with wheat, winter wheat that you see in Kansas and stuff like that, you won't see that with rye because it doesn't get. There's no real winter kill with cereal rye.
And it actively will be photosynthesizing at 38 degrees or higher with the sunshine. So like a day like today, it's probably 38 degrees down there at that crop canopy. The rye is photosynthesizing where other plants would not.
Similar topic. Are we going to be able to see any more tillering yet this spring? If we got to see them late last fall.
Yeah, so the question is, will we see more tillering if it got in late on rye, right? Yeah. You guys got comments or thoughts on that? Have you had late planted rye that you've seen really thicken up in the spring with tillering?
Depends on what the winter's like, in my opinion. I mean, it'll start tillering now, So like I got a lot of rye that because of that air cover one that we put together, we had some real issues with our barn that we put together. So a lot of our stuff didn't get planted until our Christmas times, and it's growing and tilling right now. We had all these 50-degree days. It was getting up out of the ground and doing its thing. So rye is one of those species I really don't worry about. You worry about a lot of other cover crops. Rye is one of those you can put it in the ground. It's going to do its thing. You don't got to worry about. I mean, it's not like corn or beans where you got to sit there and baby it, or wheat. I mean, just still it on the ground and come see what it looks like in the spring.
It's a very forgiving plant.
Yeah, as a general rule, the later you plant it, the less tillering you will get. Doesn't mean you won't get any, it just means it's less, so you can compensate. Later plantings, you typically go a little higher seeding rates to make up for that a little bit. But yeah, warm winters, you'll get more natural tillering because you're just getting more growth. Yes.
With just rye, are you seeing a difference in deck December, call midge, hard spot, any of the above, or any tough tests?
Yeah, so the question is, do you see any additional pests or diseases popping up where you're using just straight rye as cover crop?
I really have seen a significant reduction in disease and pests, and I don't know if I attribute it all to rye or to what it is, maybe just soil health in general. I think about any cover crop can probably give you the same benefits as we've noticed our soil improve. We've also noticed a significant reduction in the need for fungicide and insecticide. I really haven't had near the problems that I used to have, and I really didn't expect that when I started this.
I've been planting cereal rice since 2008, and never applied a fungicide or an insecticide, and I'm probably the only one in the county that doesn't. And I really don't have plant health problems, and I can't remember the last time I had harvest difficulty because the things weren't standing. So I don't think that, I don't see any downside. And there may be an upside to it just because there's just more health in the field. I mean, there's not of everything living in that field when you have that cover crop out there.
I got a real good comment about foliage. Foliage ravaged our area really bad. We got it in year one when nobody knew what it was. All the funding that the Nebraska Soybean Board has done, there are multiple research stations in my area. I have one anecdotal experience. We had an intersection, 4 different producers on every corner. We're the only one, so 2 of them were corn, 2 of them were beans, one of them we were beans. This was the very first year that we started leaving our rye standing green and then planting soybeans into it. And at the time, we weren't really sure. Gold midge, if you don't know, is a huge mystery. It's a brand new pest. We don't really know anything about it. Sat in multiple discussions with different scientists about it. Basically, we are hypothesizing that the gold midge receptors, when they see the rye, they don't recognize it as food because they can't see the soybean plant yet. So they will move to your neighbor's field. And so it's not necessarily that it's, earning the pest. It's that the pest isn't coming to your field. So our neighbor got absolutely ravaged by gold midge, and we escaped by. Now, whether there's, a lot of real evidence to support that, I can't say that. But we've seen that a couple times, and that's us and the scientists' theory, I guess.
So I guess you're not using sheep.
No. So, we used to plant dicamba beans just to protect from that dicamba drift. Now your neighbors need to plant rye just to protect from the midge coming out of your fields. Then the other comment I'll make, and then we've got a question over here, is it's not just the rye necessarily, good or bad. These guys are having success because of their system. The rye is a part of that system, but it's also doing no-till and integrating livestock when possible, and some compost and manure. So you have to think beyond the system. If you just try to stick a cover crop into a conventional system and change nothing else, it's probably not going to work very good, and it might actually hurt you pretty bad. So you've got to look at changing the whole system and not just little pieces of it. So question over here.
For Aaron, maybe Hank, I guess, talked about is it typically cut back on your herbicide program and stuff. How many weeds are you looking at being comfortable when you do that? I mean, I don't like any weeds out there, but.
So the question is, how many weeds are you comfortable with reducing these herbicides? What's that weed pressure look like?
Yeah, so I'm at a 0 tolerance for my weed program. I think I was missing that slide, but I didn't do a very good job talking about my herbicide program. But essentially, we try to get away on our beans with 1 pass. I've got away with 1 burn down before, but I have a 0 tolerance policy on my wheat program. But with one issue we have with the cover crop is I have enough biomass that I can't put a residual down and get a good effect. So I have to do it 2 passes, but I'm doing what a conventional guy would do in 1 pass. I'm just doing it in 2 passes because I can't put the residual down on top of my biomass. So I'll come in and I'll kill my crop with Roundup, and then I'll come in later. Yeah, T2, yep. And then I'll come in and I will later, when the biomass is folded over, or, I'll come in with a residual, hoping that, there's a timing to it. So you got to have the rain to get that active and, all the things to it. Probably half the time we come in with a burn down as well. So we're doing a Roundup pass and then we're doing a Roundup residual pass, or a burn down residual pass. But there's been a couple times we've been able to get away with just a Roundup and then get away with a residual pass, had the rain, got it active, and not had any weed suppression. That rye does such a great job of just eliminating all weeds. I mean, all weeds that you don't need to be putting chemicals down while it's growing.
How many times did you have to make that managerial decision where you're like, to let the beans die or let the covers rot to grow? I guess that's kind of the question I have in my mind that does suck your voice water really quick.
Well, so last year was the only year we had that decision. So we kept getting more and more gutsy, if you would, every year, letting it go further and further and further. And then we learned about a yield drag, that 3 to 4 bushel, if we let it go into the boot stick, start putting head on. For whatever reason, when it starts going from vegetative to start putting grain in, it'll start sucking some nutrients or competing against the soybeans just a little bit. So we learned about that, but basically we just keep letting it go and go and go. Now last year, you're talking an inch and a quarter, inch and a half of rain in like 8 or 9 months. Like that's hardly any water. But the soybeans, they still did well enough that I can probably honestly say that whether I had the cover crop there or not, it wouldn't have mattered. The guys next to me, their soybeans were dying just as well. They had less water than I did almost. It was just so dry. It didn't matter what we did. They weren't going to survive.
It seems like that's the best place to start and pay for some of the cover crops, the lamp, all that kind of stuff. We can there's the program for soybean keeping them later, $70+ an acre. He was somebody spraying 3 times a year. I guess it'd be pretty pricey. So I like hearing that.
On the water side, so something most people don't talk about. For every point in organic matter you add to your soil, it's 2 inches or an inch?
It's an acre inch, so
Yeah.
27,000 gallons.
Yeah, that's how much moisture water you can hold. So we've gone from 2 to 5 points. So we're able to hold that much more water than our neighbors are.
You're at 5% organic matter?
Yeah. So I'm talking on average. So 5.3 to 4.7 or 4.5. Last year with the drought, we almost consistently saw everything drop half a point in organic matter samples. I took a bunch of samples because I was interested in the nutrient slide with just some excess and not having any crop anything over. But the organic matter story was kind of the start of the show. With that loss of rain, we dropped half a point organic matter. And I think that's just because there's not enough biology going on between the plant and soil because there wasn't any moisture.
We'll let Hank and Dennis maybe comment on the herbicide issue, and then we'll kind of wrap things up as we're kind of up against our time here.
Well, I got to concur with him on the herbicide thing. We putting the residual down with all that biomass out there. When you're doing it burn down, it doesn't do any good because it won't get to the soil. So, the residual won't get to the soil. So we've been coming back with a pass and trying to do it with just one shot. The last year, again, it was so dry. So on the dry land and stuff, we did experience some weed problems and had to hit it, another time to get some of the escapes. And it was predominantly just Palmer. We don't have really anything else anymore since we started doing that. So it makes the plan of attack a lot easier because you're going after one thing. I kind of wish it was something else, but it's a pretty tough one. What we had last year, I live on Highway 81. They split our farm when they built the highway, and on one side I can't irrigate it anymore. And there's 5 acres of dry land that we pastured pretty heavy. Well, I planted it all this spring at the same time, and of course the dry land, I went ahead and planted it because it said on the bag, stored in a cool, dry place. So, we had a hailstorm at 2022 come around, I think June 14th, and it wiped us out. We had to start over completely. It's the worst hailstorm I've ever seen in my life, and consequently, I think we got 0.80 of an inch of rain at Halloween of 2022, and then we got around an inch of rain April 1st of 2023, and that was the only rainfall we got. It was less than 2 inches of rainfall that we got till June 30th of 2023. So all the guys were making fun of me that went out and didn't till because their beans came up, and their pivot corners and stuff. They came up and they looked pretty good. Mine didn't grow because the cover crop had actually dried out the top layer, and I didn't like the beans very deep in it, and there wasn't any moisture there. They laid in dry dirt till the 30th of June. Well, we got 9 inches of rain in July, and my beans came up, and I actually had a little bit of beans to harvest. I'm not going to brag about the yield, but the guys that tilled it up, they didn't have anything. They were burned up, and it was just feathers. So I kind of got lucky, but it still saved me, and whatever moisture was out there, it held it there. So it was kind of a lesson for all of us, but it was really one that I didn't expect to win, and I kind of did in the long run. So it's teaching us a lot of things, and the longer I do it, the less I want to go back to tillage. you know, we've done it for years, and it's working. So,
Yeah, the soybeans, they have no weeds at harvest, but the last 2 years I did something a little bit different. I'm in 30-inch rows, and it's so dry the last 2 years that, my soybeans, I always say, well, I think they technically canopied one day. They took them a long time to canopy. And I, 2 years ago, I was out in the field in late July, and I'm just noticing little tiny olive plants there, and I'm thinking, well, by the time harvest rolls around, I'm not going to like what I see. So I sprayed with Liberty, which they said wouldn't be effective, but it was. I had 0 weeds at harvest, and I did the same thing this last year, and the fields were just completely clean. But I haven't sprayed a herbicide that late in the year, except for the last 2 years.
yeah, Liberty and Roundup, Liberty and Seward. Liberty. You got the Liberty with it. That's right.
I got something. So I do quite a bit of custom spraying, and it is ungodly hard to kill my neighbor's weeds. And it's not the same killing weeds in my place. I don't know why it is. They've got different weeds over there. They really do. I can mix up what I think is a strong batch. I go over there and it won't touch them. But I come over to my place and it just absolutely kills them. And I think it's because I don't have the same population of weeds on my farm that they do. They're seeing the chemicals a lot more at a lot faster rate than they're seeing about my place. So the other thing I wanted to mention, so if you have henbit problems, planting a rye will eliminate that. So if you're spending $15, $20 an acre at the fall spraying, might as well plant a cover crop and not have that problem ever again.
I just wanted to say one thing for the cattle producers in here. At auction time came out 3 years ago. We chopped a bunch of rye for for silage, and we went in and planted it the same day as Memorial Day weekend, and we were busy, and we put up a quarter of rye bitch, and it got a little bit too dry on us before we ran it through the chopper, so it was hard to pack, and it was kind of ugly. It did look pretty. A kid that did the work for me, he's like, man, he runs a feed yard. This is nasty looking stuff. Kind of had some black in it, and didn't really look like very good feed at all. I had auction time come out about a month later after I had those cattle penned up and was feeding them, and I had some that I needed to cab out. I had them penned up, and the other section of the ones that had calves I kicked in the pasture across the road. The cattle that were eating that weed bleach looked better than the same cattle, and they were all from the same group. They looked better than ones out there on the grass, and the guys from auction time were just having a fit. They couldn't believe how good they looked. They did. They looked like they were on full ration, and all they were getting was licked ups, free choice salt, mineral, and that rye, which it's just out of this world what that does to an animal.
All right, let's give our panelists a hand. Thank you.